Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah! Hi, I'm Donna Loren.
And I'm Dr. Adam Gerace.
And you are listening to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast.
Hi, welcome to episode 3 of our deep dive into Donna's Dr. Pepper early days. Here we chat about chapter 5 of her memoir, the chapter entitled These Are the Good Times. Here we go. Let's talk a little bit about the Dr. Pepper commercials, Donna. I've got a question for you. How many gallons do you estimate that you consumed in your time with the company?
Oh, I was in one big bubble.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
In a life-size bottle.
It's there. I was going to say bottled blonde, but that's Barbara Eden. You were the bottled brunette, So
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned in the book that I sometimes there were 30 takes. The director wanted to fashion, just the right angle and just the right lip smacking, deliciousness and all of that. And so, I take little sips at a time. I don't think I finished the bottle, actually. But of course, they had to keep giving me a new one, so it was hard to keep track. But
and I guess because it's a clear bottle, there's nowhere to hide. It's not as if you can,
no.
Bring it to your mouth and pretend it's there. And I remember years ago, you'd found one of your old performance dresses that you'd kept all these years. And it was, and now I don't remember what color it was.
It was bright yellow.
That's right, because you wore a lot of yellow sort of in those days. And
it was my power color.
Your power color. Yeah, absolutely. Because as we've spoken about before, but as anyone that's sort of interested in that sort of area, is the idea that yellow sort of signifies power, and you probably weren't aware of that at the time, but you were sort of
I know what it felt like.
These colors. Yeah. And even in our the cover of our podcast, but also where we take our song from in Bikini Beach, the swimsuit in that was a canary yellow.
It certainly was
swimsuit. Yeah. And I remember you saying that you took this dress to the dry cleaners because it had been in storage for a while, and you wanted to wear it at a sort of convention or recent event, and the dry cleaner was a little bit perplexed because there were some stains on it, and the dry cleaner thought it might have been food. But what did we figure out that it actually was?
Yes, well, I only wore it once, and I had photographs in a magazine showing me that I wore it to a Dr. Pepper event. So obviously I was maybe a little clumsy, and a little drip, drip, drip came onto the dress. And consequently, it sat in my closet wherever I've been over the last few decades, several decades. And I was on the same hanger. I hadn't even tried the zipper, nothing. And it just sat in my closet, and this fabric was indestructible.
I bet.
And so I really didn't see any damage to it until I tried it on for the first time in 40 years or whatever, and the thread had just worn out in the sleeves, and so the sleeves fell off, and I had to take it to be repaired to a seamstress, and that's when I discovered the little stains, which then I took to a laundry, and the lady that was there invited me to come back because she said, what do you think this is? Because she wanted to know what kind of solution she should use. And I told her, well, last time I wore it was in probably 1965. And here we are, in probably 2010, 11, 12, 13, something like that. And so she took out this solution, and and it looked exactly like Dr. Pepper, which is interesting because Dr. Pepper has its own kind of distinct color because of the fruit base, and it didn't change over all those years.
Isn't that
That's so
amazing?
insane. And the color of the dress didn't change either. I didn't even have it in a plastic bag.
Isn't that crazy? And was that a dress that you made yourself?
Oh gosh, no. I did have a
No.
habit of intermittently, I would go to Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills,
Hmm.
and they had a kind of a petite department, and so I was very busy in those days, and I loved sewing, but sometimes I just had to find something quickly, and that's one of those occasions.
Isn't that great that the gel, as I think you called the dress, lasted all those years and all those moves, and for some reason, stayed with you, whichever move you made, and not even, Dr. Pepper came out easy.
Yes, it sure did. And I have to say that another outfit was hanging next to it, and that was
Mm.
the outfit that I wore on Batman
Ah,
in the
right.
last scene, and that too was the zipper worked, nothing was wrong with it. Um, and so I wore it to a different convention actually for Batman. And a little bit later on, I was notified that the Hollywood Museum
Mm.
was doing a Batman exhibit. This was a few years ago. And
Yeah.
so I volunteered my outfit because when I was on Batman, um, the only costume that was supplied to me was the cheerleading outfit.
Mm.
Everything
Mm.
else was my own wardrobe. And they trusted me. They said, just, wear what you have. We like you look.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so that outfit, it was a jacket and a little A-line mini dress, and that stayed in the museum until just recently because of the
Isn't that
pandemic. The
fantastic?
pandemic has
Yeah. So they had to
closed the
close on up.
museum, so it wasn't on exhibit anymore, and so I had it returned. But anyway, so
That's yeah, just a little sidetrack, but I know it's kind of a point that those that are interested in sort of, a lot of the, as a lot of the audience, our audience knows, that you made a lot of your clothes during that time, and worked with Simplicity Pattern because they found that out, and they sort of signed you up as well. But I thought that'd be, a nice cool little segue to sort of talk about the work that you did with Dr. Pepper, which we spoke about in the reading of chapter 5, or you read from chapter 5, I should say. And you spoke about the TV commercials and the radio jingles, and we included some cool radio jingles which your husband Jared managed to find, several years ago, that probably haven't been heard since they first, aired, all those years ago. So they were, really a really cool find. But let's talk a little bit about the commercials and the radio jingles. How often did you record those? Was it that you did a batch each year, or was it as needed? Do you
yeah.
remember kind of how many it would have
The
been?
first time I went to Chicago to film commercials, I also did the recording. So they took advantage
Mm,
of,
mm.
me being there. I was there for about 10 days the first time. And
Yeah.
I just went in and did a marathon and in one day.
You spoke about some of the mishaps in your reading them the first time you sort of filmed the TV commercials, and one was at the picnic ground where it's a picnic scene with a guy, and what was sort of flying around? Was it just
There
flies, or
was
was it something
grasshoppers
else?
hopping in my blouse.
Oh
And
my
uh
God.
and the camera was rolling, so I just had to kind of bite the bullet and
Just just
yeah,
go with
and
it.
I mean they totally didn't freak me out because I don't know, I mean it would take a scorpion or something lethal to
Mm,
frighten me,
mm.
to think that they were going to bite me and maybe cause some damage. But a grasshopper, although it was a swarm,
A swarm of, yes, it
no,
wasn't just one
no.
grasshopper, taking the liberty. It was a swarm of grasshoppers, and I remember there was another time when you were with Dr. Pepper, and you'd taken a trip to, now I can't remember where it is,
Okay.
but you'll remind me. And there were the
Yes.
chiggers, the little chigger insects. Where
That
was
was
where was
in
that? That
Raleigh, Durham,
was.
North Carolina.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
taken
So.
I was taken on a little side trip by one of the Dr. Pepper franchise owners who had a membership to
Yeah.
a country club, and he put me
Mm.
on a golf cart and just drove me around the golf course, and did not know that time of year was this tick season, which I really had
Yeah.
no experience.
Well, I'd never heard about them until we spoke about them. I
Oh,
didn't know
well,
what
I
they
guess
were.
it's very hot and humid in North Carolina, especially in the summer, and I was
Mm.
wearing a summer dress, so that time of year, the humidity and the temperature is very high, and the ticks are out in full blast. And I wasn't wearing any stockings. I was just, wearing a little sundress, and my legs were exposed, and
Mm.
and they treated me like I was a feast, and they
Well, they do say never work with children or insects or
are
something
animals.
like
Yeah,
that. So, because of course, the other scene that you spoke about in the reading was when you do the equestrian scene and getting on the horse, and kind of when you had to, get some help with a ladder onto the horse, but you kind of ended up in the wrong
that was
position,
difficult. That was
on this.
difficult.
Mm,
First of all,
mm,
I really had no experience with horses, and
mm,
I guess, I mean, we had pet dogs in our household, but I never
mm,
had to take care of them. So uh,
mm.
my parents took care of, they were their pets, even though I had relationships,
Yeah.
with the animals. I didn't
Mm.
have to take care of them.
Which dogs? Because I know at least I think your poodle ended up on a couple of
Yeah,
covers or
that was
photo shoots
touche.
with you.
He would sleep with
Touche.
me, and I would always have a box of
Mm.
pink Kleenex next to me, and he would, as a recreation, like pull out all the Kleenex. Yeah, he was a real feisty little miniature poodle. Oh boy, I
Mm,
mean, his
mm.
bark was bigger than his bite, but still, he used to antagonize everyone. He was very possessive. But when it comes to a large animal like a horse, and this was an extra
Yeah.
tall horse,
Mm,
so I couldn't even put my
mm,
foot in the stirrup and hoist
mm.
myself into the saddle. So I ended up on the back of the horse behind the saddle, and I had no idea once I was up there that the cameras were still rolling, and they saw me. Rather than me saying, "Look, let me get down and try it again," I
Yeah.
hoisted myself
Yeah.
up over this slippery, back of the saddle into the cradle of the saddle, and was quite relieved, that I finally landed in the proper place, you know.
I think you learned very early on. I'll figure out a way. To sort of get through this, because do any other of the other Dr. Pepper commercials sort of stand out in your mind? I know we spoke about those two, or you read about those two in our chapter reading, but do any of the other ones that you did, because you
Mhm.
did so many, are any of them memorable?
I just recall being in Chicago and then driving to a place called Lake Geneva, in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin, and it was a beautiful lake with private homes around it, and
Yeah.
I love water, and so just being by the water, and then they had me on a sailboat, and that was quite
Mm.
luxurious for me, and a new
Yeah.
experience. It was all
Yeah.
a new experience, and but I certainly appreciated just being by the water one day. It was more relaxing, and
Yeah.
felt
Yeah,
more
for sure.
natural. And another time we were, I don't know, I don't remember exactly where we were, but we went to an amusement park, and that was fun. I'm not a
Oh, cool.
what do you call it, a
Yeah. Uh,
I'm not a roller
roller
coaster
coaster
person.
gal.
I don't get a thrill from that, but I do like those kind of tall backs, and you sit in them, and then they spin around, and they spin faster, and your back is pressed up against the
Yeah.
back of it.
Yeah.
That was kind of fun.
See, we're the opposite. I cannot do those ones, but I don't mind a
That's
roller
why we
coaster or
complement each other, Doctor.
exactly. There you go. For our listeners, to give them some idea, because often, when you read from the manuscript, we've got very distinct dates of meetings and events and so on. And one of the reasons for that was that, your mother kept these diaries, or these little books for each year, that had your schedule in them, and she was the the bookkeeper for those, and so you inherited those, some time ago, and they list so many of these events and so many of these situations. But I remember when we were going through them in the writing, and also when I came to Los Angeles and kind of saw them in person, that your schedule, was really day in and day out. There was very little off time, wasn't there?
Yes. It was a full-time
And-
career.
mm,
So maybe even though my career, officially spanned from 16 to 21, so only 5 years,
mm,
um,
mm,
the amount of work that I did, was maybe triple it, according to
yeah,
what was accomplished. But when you're young and you just go, 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 you go, 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 go.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so it never
yeah,
felt like I was burning out most of the time. It just
mm,
felt like,
mm,
you know, um, it just gave me a purpose and a feeling that, I was fulfilling my parents' wishes. And as long as I was
mm.
doing that, I felt like I was safe.
Yeah, yeah, and it's because of course what had happened is after you signed the Dr Pepper contract, kind of ironically that even though you were probably traveling so much with Maury, at that time that you got to redesign your bedroom at home, even though perhaps you weren't always there that often, but you described in the reading how you designed this cool bedroom, including with the really fun, princess phone. I'm sure a lot of people listening probably had a
Oh, I
princess phone, if they were
I was
lucky.
it was
Yeah.
totally mod as I could reference, from magazines
Mm,
and, British Vogue and 17 and magazines like that. Uh,
mm,
and
mm,
Jean Shrimpton was my favorite model, so, I just
yeah.
loved that
Yeah.
mod look and found
Mm,
furniture, that was white, real streamlined with little brass,
mm,
fittings at the feet, the tapered legs,
yeah.
and so it was all very streamlined. And then I got to put shutters, like shutters on my windows rather than drapes or
Yeah.
shades. Not even drapes,
Yeah.
just little shades, window shades,
Mm,
that were not blackout shades, the kind that you can see the silhouette through, and
hmm.
and that was not very comforting. So uh, that was
Yeah.
a good feature.
Yeah.
And then actually, yeah, probably within those 5 years before I even left home, uh, did not really
Mm,
make too many wrinkles in my linens. So the times that I was home was very precious,
mm,
although,
mm,
there was always that tone. I almost felt safer away from home, but it was nice to know
yeah.
that I had something to come back to.
And there were two kind of things that you spoke about, sort of when we referenced talking about the room, the bedroom. The first one I wouldn't mind delving into because you did read from this. You sort of had this quite unsettling nightmare quite often during this time. Do you want to remind everyone sort of what that involved?
Oh boy. Well, yes, I will.
Mm.
For about 5 years, I think from
Yeah,
7 to
yeah,
12ish, I
mm,
had this repetitive nightmare of a faceless man. It was all
mm,
in the dark. He was wearing a long cape, black cape,
mm,
and
mm,
I was running to the ocean, and he was chasing me, and I kept running, and I got onto a pier, and I ran to the end of the pier, but because I knew I couldn't swim, I just lay
mm,
down on my back and
mm.
kind of played dead
Yeah,
when
yeah,
he uh, stabbed me and kept stabbing me and stabbing me and stabbing me, and I never bled, but I
mm,
couldn't
mm.
speak. I couldn't like yell for help. I was frozen, just hoping that he would stop and go away, which he would. He would.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then subsequently, when I moved to Hawaii, uh,
In the
yes,
1990s.
I about the first
Yeah.
year actually, maybe it was
mm,
because I was in a relationship that made me feel safe. And
mm, mm.
this dream, after decades, reoccurred. And it played it out exactly as it did in my childhood. But the
Yeah.
difference is that I could yell at the end. I could
Mm,
yell for help, and I
mm.
woke myself up yelling for help, and I've never had it
Yeah.
again. So I
I
imagine
find that,
I just,
yeah.
I began feeling empowered because there, as a
Mm,
child, um, I, the power I had was performing, but it was like um, someone was pulling my strings, um,
mm,
and and
mm.
and I was under I hate to use the word control, but it really was under the control of primarily Ruth, and then Maury went along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that just so interesting. I mean, first of all, it's a horrific dream to have at any age, but particularly at a younger age. But that it returned all those years later, and it took all those years because just to sort of put a bit of the psychology in it. So a psychologist and a researcher, Rosalind Diamond Cartwright, who's just as an aside is a mentor of mine and a friend of mine, and lives, funnily enough, in Chicago, which is what we're speaking about today. And
Oh.
she actually did a lot of the pioneering research back in. First of all, I became aware of it because she did the pioneering research into empathy back in the
Mm.
1950s, and she then went on to do sleep in the 60s and onwards. And they kind of call her the Queen of Dreams. I mean, she's legendary. Now, but she developed this theory based on what she did in the lab in those sort of early days. And I'm summarizing. There's a lot more to it, but essentially, she started off by studying people who had gone through a divorce but were depressed. And what she actually found is she'd get them into the lab over time, and they'd wake them up when they'd go into REM sleep, which is when you dream, and get them to record what they were dreaming about. And what she found over time is that the people who subsequently recovered from their depression were the ones who their dreams moved forward, and the dreams showed that they were processing their experiences. So the dream didn't stay, sort of static or, remain in sort of being about conflict with their ex-partner and so on. But in some ways, the dream moved forward and they developed sort of agency and so on.
Mm.
And so what she sort of came up with over time was this idea that we use our dreams to process our emotions and to sort of to regulate those emotions we've experienced during the day, as well as sort of integrating our experiences into sort of our schemas of our self-conceptions so that we can function better in our daily
Hmm.
lives. And so I find it, fascinating that this, and years ago I had an experience with a sort of a conflict, and I remember telling her about it and how over time, the dream did shift and change, but it took a long time.
Mm.
But for you, it's just really fascinating, or that you had this dream, and for so long it did not move. It was the same
Hmm.
situation of not being able to scream, not being able to use your voice, and to be attacked and cornered, and it took so long to be able to process that.
Yes, and actually, I kind of feel, yeah, I mean, when I woke up many years later, yelling,
Mm,
yelling for help,
mm,
um,
mm,
my realization was it was after I was made aware of my biological father.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think really that um, the the lie kind of helped to repress the
mm,
movement forward, but the
yeah,
truth, kind of liberated it.
mm,
So, and it
mm,
liberated me, which, took many, many years. It's still taking, it's still
yeah,
happening,
yeah,
25 years later.
mm,
This process of liberating yourself after 50 years of bondage, basically, but
mm,
psychological bondage.
mm,
It's that I really think that the world, the humanity needs to wake up and and know what truth is, feel it, let it resonate, breathe it, let it course through your bloodstream, and know hopefully the difference between a truth and a lie, because we're
Yeah.
told so many lies over and over again that too many of us, start believing it, and the truth
Mm,
gets all
mm,
muddled up. So,
mm.
under the guise of corruption and
Yeah.
manipulation.
And as you say, it's kind of right now, I think we're living in a period where there's so much lies, so many lies and so much corruption at the wider sort of macro level of society that not only does it pervade what we do, but I think it finds its way into our own individual, situations, or it can do, where, we start to perhaps believe that it's okay to lie or to have
It
these
is
untruths.
not.
And
It is not. Take
mm,
it from me.
mm,
Growing up with parents who lied to me. Essentially, my mother, my dad was like a silent partner, but
mm,
never disagreed with it. So, living in that, honestly, your nervous system heats up.
mm.
It's not fun. I mean,
And I know, yeah, yeah,
you are not operating in a loving environment where you can feel in harmony with your life and your surroundings, and trust the people you're with, and outside, inside and outside, your home.
and that's kind of, I think, the key to what we've spoken about in previous episodes. And in some ways, you've come to realize that a lot of the lying, about what had happened, and the fact that Maury was not your biological father, so much of that, played out in the interactions within your family and led to so much confusion. And as you've said before, that when someone is, in a state of confusion, particularly a child and so on, there's the ability to control them because they don't know what to believe, they don't know what to trust. Their identity is
And that's why
compromised.
I feel so incredibly fortunate, Adam, that I have this opportunity in my life, and I pray that so many of us, millions and hundreds of billions of us on this planet, can wake up to that, wake up from
mm,
whatever corruption that we've had to absorb and live through, to live in truth, and live in honesty, and live in trust, not just trust of what your fellow man tells you, but total trust, with with the Almighty, and
mm,
just complete
mm,
and total love. So I feel so blessed that even though I had to live in that environment for almost 50 years of my life, that there came
mm,
a time where there was a shift. And, it's just been phenomenal living
mm,
this way, living more true to myself, and more true to myself. Um, and hopefully, anyone who's listening to this that's having a conflict of deciphering, or just in that state of confusion, of not knowing if
mm,
they should trust this or trust that, that it's really good to align yourself with people, or with an environment. I mean, even if it's not a human being, then it's an animal. If it's not an animal, maybe it's a garden. Maybe it's
mm,
some life form that gives you a safe place to be, so that you can trust and build on that. And and then build on that, so that you start intuitively resonating, and you just feel like, wait a minute, that's not right. Your judgment
mm,
improves, your ability to discern improves. That's what's happening to me. And
mm,
I
mm.
just feel so blessed that I have this opportunity in one lifetime to experience, you know, one side, and now this side, which I totally prefer.
And the discernment, I think, is for me, that real take home point, that as you learn to trust yourself, and as you learn to understand truth versus lies and so on, there's that discernment to see who you align with, because and who you want to align with when you have that choice, because you do notice whose energy, if we want to call it that, or whatever else, isn't for you, or is in that sort of type of untruth, and you don't want to do that. The more that you know what it looks like to not be in lies, but to be in truth. And I think one of the ways that you did, I know you said it's taken a long time to be able to go on that process of that, but I think probably early on, you spoke about when you were in this bedroom and you had the time to yourself, that one thing you did do, I guess, to process emotion or to try to understand what was going on, as much as it was confusing, was to sing. Besides that being what you did for a day job, that was what you did at night to process your emotions. Who were the singers that you kind of you listened to and emulated or took inspiration from?
It wasn't really the singers, actually. It was songs. And since I really could not show my sensitive side, outside of my bedroom, I couldn't show it to anyone. So because I had my own bedroom since I can remember, it's probably a year and a half, 2 years old, that I would melodies and words of songs. I remember this one song called Ivory Tower, and I would go in my room, because if I felt like crying, I could only do it, in private. Not that I didn't want to have a shoulder to cry on. That would have been very comforting.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have that with anybody. I don't even recall my grandparents, even though my Zadie, was so darling to me. I was still supposed to be the bubbly, happy one. And so that's how I presented myself. So I would sing songs like that. I remember another song called Suddenly There Was a Valley, and it was the melodies, not so much who was singing them, but it was the feeling I got from them that really kind of helped me just create a little space for myself and cry and sing, and not loud, because I didn't want anybody to hear me. I just closed the door and stayed to myself, and kind of got over it, and then took a deep breath and faced the world again.
Yeah. And it's interesting you talk about that, because I know we've mentioned this before, that juxtaposition between, or not necessarily juxtaposition, but this idea that to the world, you projected this very bright, bubbly personality, and to some extent, as you've said before, that was true. That wasn't a put on. There was something else coming through there. But then there was all this kind of dark stuff that was going on behind the scenes. I remember when we were doing research, I think it was a Los Angeles Times article, and the headline from that time, and the headline was something like, Donna Loren sings to make happiness, or something like that. And that's interesting. I think all at once it's kind of honing in on that idea of that kind of personality, bubbliness. But in some ways it was a bit of a reflection. It was a way for you to try to process what was going on, and to figure that out as much as you could.
I had my voice to be able to do that. Musicians, different musicians. I mean, when you listen to Yo-Yo Ma, you see him playing his cello in total emotion, complete emotion. You see Lang Lang play the piano, completely, totally emotional. Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Andrea Bocelli, so many artists that you just go on and on and on, have that tool. And so many of them are shy, like my nature, is shy, and it doesn't, that's not what I represented. But, many, like Robert De Niro, you see him in interviews, and he's a very quiet man, although politically now he's a little bit louder. But, and his heart is breaking over what's happening to this country. but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, here he is, like the greatest living actor, on the planet of his era. And in an
Mm.
interview, he can barely speak 2 words. He's a
Yeah.
shy guy. And
It's like I was going to say Harrison Ford is like that. He does not. You can just tell in an interview compared to what he projects on screen. Yeah, there's that. Yeah,
but
light
it's
lights
but
and
it's
mirror.
an interesting uh, mechanism when you do have some
Mm.
sort of a gift. It could be science. It could whatever is a passion. It could be leather tooling. I mean, it could be carving.
Mm.
The greats, the painters, the sculptors, the aviation, inventors, anyone that's in their zone, you know may not have
Mm.
the ability to communicate or express without that particular tool. That's their way of expressing
For sure.
themselves. And thank God they've got it. Beethoven, they've got a way to express themselves. God gave them a gift. And otherwise, they just may not be able to ever express themselves.
And certainly when we speak about this idea also of getting out there and doing that, I mean, you did that on such a grand scale. Tell me a little bit about the Cow Palace, because that was performance on a ramped up level, because those audiences were now I never get this right. Was it
Yes,
17,000
yes,
people, or was it?
exactly.
Yes, I remember you saying
Eyeballs,
34,000 eyes, but I guess that makes sense because most people, give or take, have
hopefully.
probably got 2 eyes. So um, I mean, this is just ramped up stuff. Tell me about the Cow Palace.
It was a
What was the Cow
giant
Palace like?
arena. Um,
Mm.
and mostly I stayed in the backstage area, which was enormous.
Yeah.
And that's where I
Mm.
saw Muhammad Ali, which was Cassius Clay at the time. I think he was 19.
Mm.
I was 15 the first time
Yeah.
I was there. And little Stevie Wonder,
Mm.
who, was just starting his career. So he was probably 11 or
Yeah.
so. And so all the artists would gather, backstage, which, had like a whole corridor of rooms where, the artists had their own
Mm.
dressing rooms and whatever, and to prepare themselves and wait, because shows back then were like reviews. So each artist, like
Mm.
Tijuana Brass, uh, yes,
Yeah. Herb Abbott.
who's still
Mm.
playing, by the way. He has his own private club
He
called the
is. Yeah.
Vibrato in Beverly Glen Canyon by Mulholland. At any rate, it's
Mm.
like,
Mm.
okay, Tijuana Brass would play 3 songs. Um, trailers, trailer, da 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 da, uh, trailer, whatever
Mm.
that is,
Mm.
trailers for
Oh.
sale or rent.
Oh.
His
Oh.
name is
What was
Roger
his
Miller.
name? Oh no. That's right,
Yes,
Roger
King of the
Miller,
Road.
King of the
And
Road.
he would come on and do 3 songs. Then Dionne Warwick would come on and do 3 songs. And
Mm.
everyone would do their, little bits. And it was this big review, kind of like how Bob Dylan, when he decided to go out as a electric sound as well as his coffee
Mm.
shop
Mm.
sound, his acoustic sound, and create a review with other artists. And
And some of those other artists that you spoke about at the Cow Palace, because you had a couple of events around this time at the Cow Palace. Besides the people you've mentioned, there was Chubby Checker, the Four Seasons. Who else was there? Bobby
Marvin
Freeman, who
Gaye.
sings Marvin Gaye. Yeah, which your mother kind of had a interaction with, where he, according to her, kind of
Talk about a lack of
came onto her
discernment. I mean, yeah,
to
just
tell
just
you
the
about
fact
that.
that
Yeah,
she was bragging. But yeah, no, he
yeah.
was, oh God, what a charismatic man. I mean, later I got to work with him on
Mm.
Shindig, and you know and I actually
Mm.
saw him around when I lived in Brentwood. So he was a familiar figure in
Mm.
my life, and so sad that his life ended so abruptly. But
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
what a magnificent man. Oh my God. And just the music that he created. But at that time, um, there was this crossing over, it was just a teeny bit before Motown exploded. And
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
Berry Gordy had this idea that if if black artists could cross over that kind of R&B line and get into the white music world, he could be more
Mm.
successful,
Mm.
because rock and roll sold more than,
Yeah.
like what happened to Elvis, he
Mm.
sold
Mm.
more than where he got the
Mm.
music from, right? On the other side of the tracks.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
Marvin
Absolutely.
Gaye, I
And
remember him being lifted by bodyguards to leave the stage because, he stirred the women in the audience so intensely that, they just
mm.
wanted to grab him, just like the Beatles, that's how they treated him. And so he walked, they carried him right past me. I was just right there. And I saw this particular green light. It's kind of like a minty green makeup that they used to use
Mm.
on black artists to tone their complexion down.
Mm.
And I thought,
Right.
here it
Yeah.
goes.
Here it goes again, this idea that of what's, you know, yes, we're going to go for the wide audience, but, what's acceptable and certainly when we speak about Shindig in down the line in a few episodes' time, I would argue that someone like Jack Good, who was behind Shindig, was really responsible for so much of that integration of music and integration of artists on the Shindig set and not taking no for an answer in when, perhaps the powers that be were clamping down and sort of resisting, what he wanted
Indeed.
to do on that show.
Yes. Well,
Mm.
getting back to the Cow Palace, I have to bring back my friend
Yeah. Yeah.
Carl Scott, who you know,
Mm. Mm.
we were all kind of the edgy. I was always like a little bit on the edge because of my parents being so close to me, one or the other, and never letting me out
Mm.
basically to socialize at
Yeah.
all or just to feel free at all. Carl
Mm.
was such a large man that he was
Mm.
not exactly your prototype of what you'd expect to be a PR man in show business. Um,
Yeah.
and there were some fringe, we were just kind of fringe people. So um, in the San Francisco scene, which nurtured that, it
Mm.
was almost like the Paris of America, where, if you were a
Mm.
rebel,
Mm.
that was an environment that was more accepting, even though there was that very, very conservative, contingency. But, that I'll never forget, the Beach Boys performing and Carl grabbing me and saying, let's go up in the audience,
Yeah.
which I was never allowed to do. I was always kept close to my dad
Mm.
usually. And kids, it was on the 4th of July, and kids were throwing 17,000 kids. And many of them were throwing not just fireworks, but firecrackers onto the stage.
Oh,
Yeah, it
geez.
was wild. And they were throwing, of course, Carl wanted me to sit pretty high up in the bleachers. So we were out of the way.
Yeah.
But we saw these shooting firecrackers going, hitting the stage. And I would have never seen Dennis Wilson hold up his symbol, his big symbol, to shield himself from getting hit with a firecracker.
and and that kind of, just that staggering lineup of people that you were performing with at that time on those bills, on those, as you call them, reviews, kind of leads us into sort of another performance, or in this case, this was a film performance that happened around this time, is when you were invited to appear on the Dr. Pepper Celebrity Party, which was a TV special um, where all the artists kind of ended up in one setting, which was the house
It was
of,
Bob
now whose
Marcucci's
house was
house,
it?
the
It was
manager of Frankie Avalon and
Frankie Avalon, absolutely, and Fabian.
down the road from where Crest Records was is a street called Sunset Plaza. It's right on the strip, and you
Mm-hmm.
just wound up a little bit, not too high, and there was a pink Spanish villa, and that was the house party.
That was Bob
And
Marcucci's
just to
house.
give you a location visual,
I mean, this pink, driving up to this pink palace, it's a pretty distinct visual, isn't it?
That too. I mean, pink is one of my favorite colors.
So basically, to explain to the to our audience, and to tell them that the clips are available on YouTube, but essentially it was like a review as well, wasn't it? That you and Dick Clark hosted. So you were the hostess, as they called, women in those days, and were involved in emceeing the event, which was talking to these celebrities who were at this so-called party, as well as performances interspersed in between. So you performed a couple of songs, other people did as well. Besides people like Frankie, Annette Funicello. Who
Well,
else was
Johnny
there?
Mathis crashed the
Let's
party
see.
because he lived in the neighborhood.
Johnny Mathis.
He heard there was a party going
So
on.
he just
But
turned up.
yeah, there was quite an array, and usually these were the people that circulated because we all lived in West LA or in West Hollywood, and just generally showed up at the same place. But the unique part, you've got Connie Francis in one corner, Connie Stevens in another corner, Jan and Dean, George Hamilton, and it just went on and on. Dick and Dee Dee at the time, and they were lovely.
That's right.
And
Yep.
the Righteous Brothers, I mean, there were definitely familiar faces.
Yeah.
But may I say that, this was my first, well, let's see, I was signed to Dr. Pepper in June, and September is when I did my commercials in Chicago, and October, so the next month, so here we go. I'm 16 and went through this summer, and now it's fall.
Yeah.
So what, June, July, like within 4 months, I'm notified that I'm co-hosting a live television show, national television show, with Dick Clark.
Yeah.
I never met him.
So this was the first
I was
time
driven up there by Maury, and as I walk onto the property, I meet him, he hands me another microphone, and we work. That is it.
And you're
I
ready
am
to
not
go.
kidding. Talk about, complete spontaneity. And basically, I just kind of followed him around and was close by. And whenever he wanted to incorporate me, I was there. I was there for him for the hour, and it was a Dr. Pepper special on ABC.
And you performed a couple of songs on that. I think you might have, for one of them, How Can I Face the World, I think, was that pre-recorded and you lip-synced, or was that was? But you did perform live another song with the band The Challengers called Bill Bailey, which you did a lot back then. But tell me about that. That was spontaneous. Well, it wasn't spontaneous.
Yes,
no,
it was
spontaneous, wasn't it? You hadn't actually performed with you hadn't planned to perform with The Challengers. What happened? You essentially walked in and had to figure that one out?
You just do it, I mean, on live TV, just, have a quick run through with these young guys and just go for it. But fortunately, I played the piano enough so that I could accompany myself, and they just played along with it. And, and they did a fine job. So
talk about crazy, just being thrown in. And like you said, your kind of early introduction to the audience, besides, filming the commercials and so on, is this, this live ABC special with Dick Clark, of all people, who, of course, you worked with quite a bit over that period of time.
And I hope everyone enjoyed listening to Dick's voice. I mean, he has been gone from our planet for a while, but he still is remembered and cherished. So it's nice to hear his voice and his welcoming and just his chatting, because he was so comfortable in that environment.
Yeah, that was he was.
Oh,
he was,
and I just
the real deal
remembered
in terms of
something.
that. I
Well,
think
that was my first time that I was introduced to Paul Peterson.
Of course, your friend Paul, because he was there as well. I guess with probably Shelley Fabaret, who had played his sister on the Donna Reed show.
Yes,
and so that was the
and
first time you met Paul as well.
There was some now in at the party there was no chemistry, But apparently someone thought that there could be, and therefore he became my escort, really, throughout my early, the first few years of my career.
That's right. And of course, a lot of, and I mean, this is probably nothing new to our listeners, but of course, so many of those arranged dates were magazine, opportunities to kind of, sell the idea that perhaps
Never.
you two were dating or that and of course, so many of the people at the celebrity party, which is kind of fun because, this is all around the time of then, coming up soon is Muscle Beach Party, and related. But, people obviously you'd worked with Annette before, but there was Frankie, there was, I think, John Ashley and Debbie Wally were there as well, who you ended up working with. It was a whole range of I mean, it's a staggering lineup. It really is when if anyone goes to YouTube and sort of watches it. But quite an introduction as the Dr. Pepper girl on this live special.
Oh boy, it seems like a lot of fun, and it was in a way. I was pretty excited that suddenly I felt like, really, I hope I can do this, but I sure didn't show any insecurity. I just went for it, and everyone was quite receptive.
Absolutely fantastic. And I think we've covered a tremendous amount, I think, in this conversation. Today I've had a great time sort of, talking about some of those really cool experiences. But also more than that, being able to delve into which this forum allows us to do, and our listeners allow us to do, is to delve into some other stuff, behind all the the performances or the costumes or whatever else, to talk about, I think, things that are just as relevant now as they were for you then, as you were trying to understand these things, but to be able to come out the other side of it. And like you said, I think at the heart of it, given everything that's going on right now, this idea of truth. What is truth, and being in truth?
Please, we really, it's such a different way of breathing to be in truth. And anyone who has been blessed with living a life where they can always be in truth and discern when they're not, that's the world that I think was designed for us to actually flourish.
The lift is great, the flavor fine, it's Dr. Pepper time.
This is Dick Clark, saying that when it's time to take it easy, relax, refresh, and enjoy Dr. Pepper, today's distinctively different soft drink. Or as Donna Loren sings it,
good times begin with Dr. Pepper, distinctively different Dr. Pepper. Not a cola or a root beer, a light and lively taste that you'll cheer. The lift is great, the flavor fine, it's Dr. Pepper time.
for fun-filled flavor, lighthearted lift, make yours Dr. Pepper. Not a cola or a root beer. It's the soft drink for today's light and lively taste.
It's Dr. Pepper time. Dr. Pepper time. Dr. Pepper time. Yes,